I used to believe love had an expiration date, like a carton of milk sitting in the back of the fridge until someone finally checked and tossed it away. And after my marriage ended nearly 15 years ago, I quietly convinced myself that romance was no longer part of my story. I was 59, living in Portland, Oregon, with my days wrapped around work, my garden, and my grandchildren, and I thought that was enough. It wasn't that I was unhappy because my life was full in many ways, with 2 wonderful children grown and settled, a circle of friends who loved books, coffee, and long walks by the river, and peaceful Saturday mornings tending my flowers. But if I'm honest, there were nights when the silence of my house felt heavier than the walls themselves, a silence I never admitted to anyone, not even my closest friend Ellen. Then came the day everything changed. It started with a community art class Ellen had practically dragged me to, insisting I needed a new hobby to shake things up. I resisted, protesting that I couldn't even draw a straight line, but she laughed and shoved the registration form into my hands. And so one Tuesday evening I walked into the dusty old community center with the smell of paint and clay hanging in the air. I felt awkward, surrounded mostly by people younger than my children, until I heard a warm voice behind me asking, "First time here?" I turned, and there he was. Michael, 62, tall with silver hair, a smile that lit up his whole face, and gentle eyes that made me feel seen without judgment. When I admitted it was my first class and I was completely out of my depth, he chuckled and said, "Good, that makes 2 of us." That first evening we laughed more than we painted, his canvas looking like a storm and mine like something from kindergarten, but somehow our messy art freed me from the little voice in my head whispering that I was too old for this. Weeks rolled by, and Tuesday nights became my favorite part of the week. Michael always saved me a seat, and soon our conversations spilled beyond the classroom. He walked me to my car, we lingered in the parking lot, and eventually one evening he asked if I'd like to grab a cup of coffee. My heart skipped. It was such a simple thing, but it had been years since anyone asked me that way. I hesitated but said yes. Coffee turned into lunch, lunch turned into long walks by the river, and long walks turned into late-night phone calls where we talked until yawns interrupted our words. He had a way of listening that made my words matter. He told me about his life, how he had been widowed for over a decade, raising 2 children alone, and I admired his quiet strength. One spring afternoon as we sat on a bench by the water, he said he never thought he'd find someone to share this stage of life with, that he believed love was only for the young, and his words mirrored my own secret thoughts. When I whispered, "Me too," he reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. In that moment, the years melted, and I wasn't a woman counting candles on a cake anymore. I was simply alive again. But it wasn't all smooth. When I told my daughter about Michael, she was cautious, worried I might get hurt, but deep down I knew this was different. The hardest moment came when he asked me to travel with him. A road trip along the Oregon coast. I was thrilled but terrified, almost said no, but then something whispered, "You deserve this," so I said yes. That trip changed everything. We drove with the windows down, stopped at diners, laughed over pie, walked barefoot in the sand, and shared stories by the fire that we had never spoken aloud before. One starry night he told me I'd made him believe in love again, and with tears in my eyes I told him he had done the same for me. In that moment, I realized love doesn't have an age limit. It doesn't check IDs or count wrinkles. It finds you when you least expect it. Now at 60, I no longer say I'm too old for love. I say I'm grateful. Grateful for Tuesday nights and messy paintings. Grateful for a man who reminded me my story wasn't over but just beginning a new chapter. Because I thought I was too old for love until he changed everything.